Okay, love.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of Ballet International, and I'm so pleased to have online Mrs. Constanza Scheurer. I hope I pronounced well the name and the surname.
Mhm.
And we are in touch already from a few years on Facebook. And she has a wonderful background in the dance field. She is in United States, but she has been also in Germany, and her family also has worked in Germany and has grown up in Germany. Then she moved in United States when she was very young, and so I will try straight away to ask you, Costanza, how did you start ballet, and who encouraged you to study ballet?
Well, my father was the principal bass of the Ballet Russe,
Yes.
and he knew about Balanchine, Massine, Danilova, Tumanova, Tumkovska, he first, because he was a musician, trained me in violin, viola, and piano.
Mhm.
My grandfather was made his debut at age 16 with the Berlin Philharmonic and was a pupil of the famous Joach, Joachim,
Mhm.
Joseph Joachim, who knew Brahms.
Yes.
And so the two of them together said, well, you trained in music to pursue the
Yes.
career of your choice. Now, they were very ambivalent about ballet
Yes.
because the course had lived through the wars, and they said to me, well, you're going to start jazz. My father, which I didn't know until he told me, had fed the stars of the Ballet Russe as they were going bankrupt.
Mhm.
And with his own money, the musicians were being paid, but the dancers were not. So my father every night would take 5 dancers out to dinner with his own money and feed them and kept them alive. And he said, I can't believe you're doing all this work on stage and there's no monies for you. What's going on? So when I started my career, of course, that was their experience and they're very concerned for my welfare. So they said, okay, well, you can try it for a little while and see how you do. Now, we're ambivalent, but we support you and all your efforts. Well, so they sent me off to Europe when I was 15, and that was to Lisboa, and where I danced with Ballet International, it was called, or International di Ballido at the time. Um, and then I came back to the US and was then sent on to New York City Ballet and had the chance to work with the greats. And also Nemchinova was still alive, Vera Nemchinova. So it was Nemchinova, uh, it was Tumanova, Tumkovska, Danilova, Balanchine, Jerome Robbins. They were all there. And it was just the most, I was very young, 16. And so I was, you know, just paying more attention at my classwork and feeling like so very, very shy. I didn't speak a whole lot of words. You just don't because it's out of respect and learned.
Yes.
And it was hard work. It was very, very hard work.
Yes.
But I can say that what I was taught in the beginning and my original teachers here in my state were from the Valley Roos from that time. Their name was Andahashi. Her name was Anna Adrianova, And she was the original one that Messine choreographed the ballet Cotillion on, and and then his name was Laurent Andahashi, and he was known as the Golden Slave. So they had known my father from the ballet roost, so there was a huge connection worldwide with my
Yeah.
grandfather, my teachers at home, my teachers in New York. Um, it's a very small world, I found, that we're all interconnected in some beautiful, beautiful way.
But was
You know,
it a connection with the world of music and ballet, I think?
absolutely, absolutely,
Because
because
you were very lucky to have so many musicians in your family.
oh, I mean, the world was music until I came along. And then they said, okay, we're not real keen on this ballet stuff, but we've played all the music for the ballet, so
Yeah,
we will allow you, but with trepidation.
yeah,
We're ambivalent, but you've been trained dutifully in music. You've done very well,
yeah,
violin, viola, and piano. I
yeah,
passed all their tests, and they said, okay, now you can go on. So there was a family hierarchy that you had to go through.
yes,
And then once I passed that, then they became very proud. They are very proud of my ambition, dedication, promises that I'd made to them,
yeah,
and the performances that they saw of
yes,
me dancing.
yes. And so you started to learn and to develop the art of ballet in United States or also in Germany?
Also in Germany, yes. Also in Germany and also in Portugal and
Mm.
Italy.
And in
Yes.
Germany, which town have you been working?
Oh, my family, as they say in German, meine Familie kommt aus Köln.
Yes,
Köln, Cologne.
Cologne.
Yeah, yeah. And then Berlin.
So
Then
originally your name sounds more German, Constanza Scheurer. It's
sure,
more the
yes.
German, is more the German name.
Yes, it is a German name. It's
Yeah.
originally from Köln,
Yes,
and then it's Köln on the Rhine, right
yes,
in the Rhine River. And then my grandfather was a pupil at the Royal Hochschule in Berlin
yes,
with Joseph Joachim violin.
yes.
And so he made his debut in Berlin at age 16 with the Berlin Philharmonic. So, yes, they were decidedly very, very German.
Mm.
But he married a Norwegian. So then we had a crossover into the Scandinavian world, and they were very funny people.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure the traditions were carried on and that we were dancing and performing at the highest caliber. I was told to never embarrass the family name. It was forbidden. Don't embarrass us because, it's not permitted.
Yes. And so you have been learning ballet with the most famous teachers like Balanchine, Danilova, and many others.
Yes, Nemchinova,
Yes,
Tumanova, Tumtatska, then in, let's see, Revshinskaya, Lasheen, Andahazi, Adrianova, let's see, um, trying to think of all the ones in Europe as well. There was oh, a whole lot in Europe uh, that I danced with in Italy.
yeah,
Um, we did the festival, the White Nights, in 2006. and
Yeah.
I was there in a place called Ascoli Piceno in
Yes.
Italy. So I was still active then, doing many things. That's an ancient town back to the 1600s. And then we went to Cologne, and my family there has one of the biggest fine arts schools in a town just outside of Cologne called Hennef.
Yes.
And it's a school for performing arts. So it's still there. Uh,
Yes.
it's run by my cousin Heinz Lingen, Lingen.
Yes.
So
And do they
you
do
know,
ballet? Do they do ballet also?
and they do mostly, I think, international teaching of how to do art, like draw art,
Mm.
painting, and technical things that are,
On the
you
computer?
know, computer type things. They
Yeah.
asked me to come and teach ballet,
Yeah.
um, and I was with my mother, and I just wasn't ready to move back, at the time. And so I said, well, I'll think about it, but I still have invitations open. I'm still in touch with my cousins, you know,
And
they're
what were the ballet that you enjoy dancing the most?
Well, I think that one of my favorites is Romeo and Juliet with Prokofiev. I guess I'm kind of a musical snob because I've got my favorite music, Prokofiev, Tchaikovsky, Bach, the three B's, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms.
Yeah.
But we don't normally dance to those composers, but Tchaikovsky and Prokofiev. Um, and I've danced all the Tchaikovsky ballets. Then, of course, with Balanchine, it was Stravinsky. My gosh, I know Marie Stravinsky, and she's lovely. And I just love all of the Stravinsky interactions. And he was just a lovely man who was also with me, with my family in Los Angeles when he came over to the States.
Yeah.
My father knew him, and my grandfather in Los Angeles when he was in that part of his life. But he was just an incredible composer, and also just the kindest, most genteel man you would ever want to know. I
Mm.
mean, absolutely magnificent,
Yeah.
or we would say magnificat,
Mm.
you know. So the Stravinsky ballets are very prominent, of course, in the Balanchine world, as you all know.
Yeah.
Symphony in C, all the things that were the choreograph, the big relationship between Balanchine and Stravinsky was enormous. I
Yeah.
mean, it still stands today. I think that's probably the foundation of the school, for the most part. You dance really fast, Matita Allegro.
Yeah.
Your feet move faster than you can believe they could ever move. Your extensions are high. Mine
Yeah.
were naturally high. My feet were naturally pointed. I was very blessed by that. And I could move fast. We only had one. Danilova was my favorite teacher, and she would come into class and she would say in her very Russian accent, "I do not teach pirouette in my class because I cannot pirouette. Therefore, I can't teach pirouette. So we do not pirouette in my class." You know, and then, so I would just laugh and I would say, "Well, that's good because I can't pirouette either." you know. But I could do everything else. The petite allegro, I could move
Yeah.
fast across the floor. I could,
What
I could,
was your variation or your ballet or a dance ensemble that maybe technically you were a little bit worried because the technique was too strong, or you were scared to not be up to it, correctly in all the moves. Every dancer is a little bit scared about some parts of the ballet. So what
Oh,
was the part that you were
absolutely.
scared a little bit?
Oh, I was scared all the time at City Ballet, New York City Ballet, because it was just so, I was so young and it was so intimidating to be around the icons of the world. And of course, my father had spoken about them, and had fed them, and, and had big trepidation about, going there because of the difficulties he thought that I would encounter, um, with me being so shy, as an individual. I didn't speak much as a child. I just dance was my movement, was my way of expression. And because we were always playing music in our home, and we weren't allowed to do a lot of things that other children were, it was all about music.
Yeah,
Um, and so, and then it was my grandfather's house and my grandmother's house. And over there, it seemed to me like it was like a museum, because there was things there from Egypt, and my
yeah,
grandfather had traveled all over the world.
yes,
And it was, to me, sitting at his, Steinway D piano, and I was 5. I mean, it was, they were intimidated as a family,
yeah,
as a whole. And so when they sent me off to New York City Ballet, having known what I knew, that in and of itself was very, very intimidating and scary. And the Balanchine ballets are not easy, and certainly Stravinsky.
yeah,
Just to count that, I mean, I could read scores when I was young. I was taught to read scores of music. I did set Firebird later on in life, and dance, the Rite of Spring, and that's coming up here in my state, in the symphony. The opening is 20th of October, but it's so hard.
yeah,
Um, just if you read the score, it's like every 2 bars, the time signature changes.
yeah,
And that to me, knowing what I knew already as a young girl and having to play it and then
yeah,
having to dance it, was just like, well, okay, I had a one up because I had read the score or was able to read music, but still, it's so difficult. The difficulty behind these compositions, and you wonder, good heavens, this person actually made this music, and then they were able to choreograph. Balanchine was able to, do things that were beyond, I think, human reality.
yeah.
I mean, to me, it was extraordinary.
So you had a different experience with different teachers, and who was the teacher that inspired you the most, and that you were the more comfortable to work with during class?
Alexandra Danilova and Vera Chimova.
And how were they
Those two.
technically? Would they give difficult classes?
They were, well, they were all difficult. Nothing was easy. But they were kind
Yeah,
and very genteel.
yeah,
In other words, when the one male that I had was Stanley Williams,
yeah,
that would come in and teach, and he was, to me, frightening. And I remember once, there was a big, pillar in the studio, and I couldn't quite get his Petit Allegro combination in my mind, which wasn't usually difficult for me, but that day it was. So I hid behind the pillar, and he said, you behind the pillar, come out. And then I sheepishly came out behind the pillar. And he said, what do you think you're doing? And I go, he goes, now you're going to do it by yourself. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, you know, you know. And so I did, and I was successful, thankfully. But um, he was terribly intimidating.
Yeah,
Balanchine and Stravinsky were very um, different. They were all speaking in, of course, Russian. And so, I understood bits and pieces, but they were more like pointing at you,
yes,
that pointing the fingers rather than, addressing you in English,
yes,
like some others. Like Danilova spoke English, Tumanova, Tumkovska, Nemchinova. They all spoke broken English, which was understandable. You could understand what they were saying to you. And of course,
yeah.
the combinations, and then what they wanted you to achieve, and the corrections were always done with their hands on your legs
So,
or your.
what was the style of the classes? Was it a purely Russian style, or did they modify
It was
and adapt the class to for the United
Vaganova.
States dancers?
It was Vaganova.
It was
It was the
Vaganova.
Russian style, Vaganova. Yes, the
Yeah,
most difficult, which I find the Kirov still does, and that's what they're known for.
yeah,
Vaganova, the Vaganova school.
the Vaganova school. And
Yeah,
so, when you became professional dancer, how many years have you been working as a professional dancer?
41,
41.
41.
And did you ever choreograph something?
I didn't, well, I did choreograph. Yes, I did when I was sent to the University of Washington
Yes.
School of Dance, and I did choreograph, but I used non-traditional music. They're from the UK. It was called One Giant Leap, and they'd gone all over the world. They were a National Geographic special, and I had to choreograph for the graduating seniors. And to my horror, they had never been on stage before in their lifetime. I just couldn't even believe they were going to get a diploma, and they never danced ever on a stage. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. They've never danced on stage ever, and you're going to give them a diploma to go teach bad ballet. I mean, I was mortified. So I said, no, we can't do anything traditional because you don't know anything traditional. I can't possibly teach you
Yeah,
anything, that I learned because I learned from the masters.
yeah.
So I chose non-traditional music, and I did choreograph, and each one of them, there was six, and I gave them each a solo. It was beautiful music. Um, and it was just it was called Racing Away. The track on the album is called Racing Away,
Mhm.
and it's a really beautiful piece of music. And but it's for me, it was teaching them to count was very very challenging because I'd counted my life, and then I realized most of the ballet world doesn't count at all. I mean, they don't count music like I was taught to count as a child of musicians.
Yeah,
So I was shocked when I found out that everywhere I went, most people didn't count. They just sort of looked, they learned and said, E, you know, as in Russian, they'd say E, which means to start, or Sagraya,
yeah,
Jacques Sagraya, you start, so it was just like they would sometimes show combinations with their hands,
yeah.
like it's la 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 with the hands. And then you would then they'd say Sagraya or E, and then you'd start,
Because
so
the
it was
Russian people, when they count, they say
exactly,
E.
yes, E, yeah, it was E. That's how they start the class, so they start the combination. But they first, if they couldn't show it to you, like one of my greatest teachers was Edward Caton, and he was the partner of Anna Pavlova,
Yeah,
and um, and he was in his 80s when I met him, and I was young, and so he had a cane, and he would just stomp his cane with disgust with the men that couldn't jump, and he would say, Constanza, come and teach these son of a bitches how to jump. They can't jump. Teach them how to jump. Show them, and I took care of him, personally, would get him things, do errands for him.
yeah,
He was so kind, but he was so old when I met him. And I was a mere 17-year-old at that time.
yeah.
Um, but when you're serving the masters and you think, my God, he partnered Anna Pavlova. He was her partner. And you have the grace to work with him and serve him.
Absolutely.
That's incredible to me.
It was the best gift you ever had.
Absolutely. I mean, to be able to work with the icons of the dance world has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. And my parents and grandparents, having to play the music for the icons, and then teach me the music to say, okay, if you're if you measure up,
Yeah.
then you can go forward. But understand, you may
So
not measure up in the world.
you were the type of ballerina who used to count during the dance
Yes.
instead of just feeling and following the music?
Well, I did both
Yes.
because they didn't they would show it with their hands,
Mm-hmm.
but in my head, I when the music started, I could count in my head.
Yes.
At the same time, they'd shown the combination with their hands.
Yes.
Um, they're very visual.
Yes.
So it was me. It was a twofold with myself because of my musical training. But it wasn't like. But when I did choreograph, I outwardly counted
Yes.
um, to my students, but many of them didn't really catch on because they weren't musically trained. They
Yeah.
were balletically trained. But even then, in the university systems in the States, it's difficult. It's not like your New York City Ballet where you're dealing with the masters, you
Yes.
know.
Well, I think it's very important for ballet dancers to have a good knowledge also of music, because
Uh,
this helps a lot when you dance to count on your own for the variation, for the dance ensemble, for everything you do on stage, and also for class. It helps a lot
Absolutely. Yes,
because then you
absolutely.
are out of music.
Well, you just don't, you're not in step,
Yeah,
it's like catch up,
yeah.
and then you could have a big disaster in the middle of a performance if someone wasn't counting properly, you know.
And what is the funniest things that happened during class that you may remember? Sometimes it happens that the pianist goes in the wrong partition music, or sometimes he goes too fast instead of too slow, or sometimes, there are many funny things that happen in a ballet studio during
Well,
class.
it was we were rehearsing Swan Lake once, My father had a funny word for it because he would quack. He was a musician with a very funny sense of humor. So he would quack quack, and he would say, "Oh, are you doing the quack quacks?" And I said, "Yes, Dada. I'm doing the quack quacks now." And then I was in a rehearsal one day, and there was a young girl who didn't put on her contact lenses that day. And we were doing the crossovers in Swan Lake, the famous crossovers, where you go one side to the other. Well, she didn't have her lenses in, so she took down a whole line of swans
Oh.
onto the floor, onto the floor. And that was that. I remember her name was Barbara. I won't give her last name on film, but I'll never forget the line of swans going down. And I thought, oh my heavens, she just took out a whole line of swans because she was doing the famous crossovers back and forth.
Was that during rehearsal or during performance?
Um, that was during performance.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness, right? Yeah, it was quite dramatic. It was just like pick them up. And then there was a time when they used to put that smoke on the stage,
Yeah,
to have the effect of fog.
like a Giselle second act. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they put too much on, and it was like a skating rink. It was literally like a skating rink. And all of a sudden, you know, it was actually Swan Lake at the time, and the little ones. I was, I'm very tall, so I was at the very end, but the first swans were entering, and every one of them was like trying to like second act, like, or it was Giselle, where you with the arabesques, or was that Bayadere? Yeah, I think maybe it was Bayadere. I'm confusing all the ballets because they all
Maybe
have.
it's Bayadere with the arabesque. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. It was by Deborah the Arabesque. And
Yes.
so I was at the end of the line because I was taller. I went by height, and they were sliding and slipping and sliding, trying to make those graceful turns, and they were going down like flocks, you know, and I thought, oh Lord, and the long white tutus, bam, bam, it was just really, really awful that they'd
Yeah.
put too much of that stuff on stage for too much fog. Yeah.
Well, sometimes it happens, yes, funny things on stage or in the ballet studio. Um, so relating to your family who were great musicians, uh, have they been watching you dancing on stage?
Oh, yes. My grandfather lived to be 97 years old. And I remember my sister taking him to one of my performances, and he had this. He was pretty much blind and deaf, but it was his stage that he'd graced for more than 50 years.
Yes.
And she said, "Oh, Grandpa was, talking so loud, but of course he didn't know." And she said he opened the door and he says, "Tonight my granddaughter dances." He was so proud, and my father too, but he was more, he wasn't deaf, but he was very, very proud to see me dance Swan Lake.
Yeah.
um, he was so proud. I think that those were. My mother watched me dance Taglioni and Potacot. I was Taglioni, and although she was not musically trained, she was rather tone deaf. But she would give me corrections of my hands or whatever because she'd been watching my whole career.
Yes.
And so when she watched me do taglioni, she would say, well, if this could be this, and this could be that, it'd be better. Could you correct this? And then she came to see me do sugar plum. And she said, well, darling, it was good, but, it can be better if you would just, I said, Mama, I said, these lifts are killers. I said, a running back shoulder sit is not easy, and to fly into someone's arms and trust them to catch you. I
Yeah.
mean, really, Mama. I said, you don't quite understand like Daddy did, because Daddy was different in watching that actually take place, where Mama didn't have the same background,
Yes.
but my father did.
Yes. Was your mom also a dancer?
No, she was a critical care nurse.
Oh, okay.
So obviously from a different background, but
Yes.
she married into the family,
Yes.
and so she, you know, adopted it all because this was her family now. I
Yes.
mean, we were her children, and she
So,
adhered to all of the traditions of the
yeah.
family, which
Yes.
was music and dance and art.
Yes. So in your family at home with your grandfather and all the rest of the members, you were speaking more English or German?
Five languages.
Wow.
There was my great aunt lived with us from Norway. So there was Norwegian, there was German, there was English, there was Danish, and there was also French.
That's a lot.
Yes, it was, and so it was, to me as a young girl. They were very entertaining. You
So
know,
for ballet, the French terminology of the steps were easy to pronounce.
yes, exactly. I understood them
Yeah.
very, very well because I've been growing up with them.
Yes.
Uh, I grew up with French and had French classmates as a
Yes.
young girl in grammar school,
Yes.
primary school.
And
Um,
in Germany, did you ever dance for an important ballet company?
no, I didn't. I had a chance. But there were things that happened in the family that prevented me from going back. I was invited, of course, to Berlin, and also with some other people. But no, I still want to go. But the world has been so locked down
Yes.
that I do have I'm on my fifth passport. You
Yes.
know, someone asked me if I'd ever traveled abroad. I said
Yes.
yes. And they go, 31. I go, very young. I'm on my fifth passport. And they here they last for over a decade. So that's 50 years of passports, you know.
And
So
which ballet did you choreograph?
um I choreographed Firebird. Well, actually, you can't really choreograph it, you set it. Um, you set Firebird. Um, I set it with Conrad Ludlow from New York City Ballet. Um, and talked to Marie Stravinsky about it because it's the Igor Stravinsky Foundation. You don't do things without permissions. I learned that in music and dance there are things that you have to do that are legalities to
Yes.
actually have the pleasure of that music or that choreography.
Yes, you must
You have
have the authorization of either the music and the choreography.
exactly. You've got to pay fees. You've got to know the legalities. You've got to ask permissions. You've got to have it signed off.
Mm.
Otherwise, they can come after. I was Isabel Fokine was also one of my classmates. And of course, she held the Fokine Foundation for her grandfather.
Yes.
Um, and so, and she would say to me, "Don't you ever think of doing anything Fokine unless you ask me." I said, "Well, Isabel, I assure you, if that comes to a light, I will come to you, Isabel." I believe she lives in New York City now. Um, or maybe she's gone back to Europe. Unclear where Isabel is at this point. I
Yeah.
know where Marie is. Marie goes all over Europe. It's Marie Stravinsky,
Yes.
and to open music
Yeah.
um, in several cities.
And now that you see the new generation of ballet dancers compared to the technique of your generations, do you find a progress, a positive evolution that has been done through the many decades?
Um, quite frankly, I'm a little sad because the nuances that I was taught just with the hands, a very simple hand gesture. We were taught pantomime. We were taught that every single gesture you do with your hands or your head, the tilting of your head back and forth, or the gesture of a hand, or just a finger, or the motioning of your arm, or your stance, everything means something.
Yeah.
And they don't do that anymore.
Mm.
It's become more commercialized in the States, not in Europe, because I know very well in Europe it's not that way. Um, they are still very, very beautiful in the big companies in Europe, the Royal Ballet, the English National Ballet, Berlin State Opera Ballet, in Italy, Carla Fracci, they're still very, very beautiful. And they're teaching the traditions of the masters. And of course, Russia, which we don't talk about much these days, but the Kirov is still alive and they still are teaching, that they're still handing it down from uh, Vaganova. The
Yeah.
Vaganova School still does exist, the Children of Theater Street,
Yes.
Princess Grace of Monaco.
Mhm.
Um, all of that does exist over there, and especially in Italy as well. The Italian school, is just beautiful. I just find that it's sad in the States that it hasn't, it has stayed on the East Coast, yes. It stayed in the Balanchine School, and it stayed with Boston Ballet. It stayed in oh, very few, but mostly just East Coast. More music, like where my father was trained at the Curtis
Mm.
Institute of Music in Philadelphia. Philadelphia still has it, and but it's East Coast. It doesn't really mm, go to the West Coast.
Yes.
Although John Clifford has been very, very proactive
Yeah.
in Los Angeles, and he has kept the Balanchine spirit alive.
Yes.
I applaud him. I'm a friend with John, and he has just been wonderful in keeping LA Ballet and his technique alive,
Yeah.
and the Balanchine, you know, world alive in Los Angeles.
I think your voice is disappearing slowly, slowly.
He's the only, yeah, it is just
Just I think it's a question of internet. Don't worry.
and performing with masks on, even in the symphony orchestras
Yeah.
here with masks on.
Yes.
It's been difficult, I think, with the pandemic. It's kind of really put a damper on the progression or lack of progression or just a stalling of things out. I don't think it was anyone's intent. I think it just was what happened in the world. And it was a worldwide pandemic that still is out there. And I'm shocked more and more that it's still hitting the US so hard. COVID is um still the US in Boston especially this week
Yes.
of new COVID. So
Yeah.
it's still hitting the US and I'm you know, but it's nobody wants to speak about this because they want their vote. So it's it's sad to me
Yes.
because
Well,
it's
we must give time to time, and things will maybe return back to normal after the COVID situation. And we must be patient. And also, dancers will start to work again, like before, and maybe even better than before.
oh, I think that it'll come back. I really
Yes.
believe that.
Yes.
I have to hold out faith, hope, and love
Yes.
of the art form and also the music because slowly the music is returning. I've seen it.
Yes.
I get the updates from the music world as well because of my family, and
Yes.
I get the updates from Europe.
Yes.
And so I do believe that it's a slow progression,
Yes.
but not as quickly as I would like to see. But it's just for safety reasons, and
Yes.
it's not quite the beginning of the seasons are just beginning here in the States, which is usually September, October,
Yes.
and then we'll get more into holiday traditional things. But
Yes.
we used to start rehearsing for Nutcrackers in October, and we had multiple casts, three casts in one company of each one cast for each, because you just can't dance over and over again and
Yes.
not be completely done for it. So um, it's starting slowly again. Our seasons are more slow this year than last or the years before that didn't have a season at all. I
Yes.
mean, we saw what they were doing on the internet with just masks and just trying to just
Oh, it's very difficult to work with the mask. I think many dancers they couldn't do the class properly with the mask on, and it was
it's
very
very
difficult
hard to
for
breathe.
everyone, also for the ballet teachers, because the mask you don't understand what people say. You can, guess what they say, but sometimes the voice is not clear, and you can't breathe well, with the mask.
Not at all.
No.
It's very hard to breathe.
It's very hard, yes. But I think slowly, slowly, everything will return to normal. And I do hope also to see in United States the situation for ballet dancers returning to normal, because there is a lot of talent also within young people in United States. United States is the land that gives hope for ballet also. And
Well, I believe the East Coast and a lot of the West Coast, like I said, John Clifford
yeah,
has been prominent in Los Angeles.
yes,
And then there's some in Pacific Northwest Ballet and San Francisco Ballet.
yes,
So the coastal cities, there's three of them that I would recommend. And on the East Coast, of course, it's going to be Boston Ballet,
yeah,
Boston Symphony, LA, and then there's New York City Ballet, and then the Met
yes,
will come alive again, the Metropolitan Opera, then the Curtis in Philadelphia. starting its concerts, music-wise, and Philadelphia, as well as dancing. There are a lot of my teachers that are in touch with me that have retired, but still, I hear from daily that message me and say, "Hey, beautiful girl, how are you?" It's so nice to hear from people that that were my teachers, and I say, "Oh, my beautiful teacher, look at you now. Where are you?" And they're finally out and about with their husbands and traveling finally again, and
Well,
that's so lovely.
it is so nice for the ballet dancer to meet up again with the teachers.
Yes,
Recently I made an interview with Mrs. Nicola Middle Miss Snow, who was ballet mistress of a packed ballet, and
oh yes,
yes, and
South
she's
Africa
South Africa, yes, and there is a lot of talent in that
and
country.
South Africa, absolutely.
Yes, and they have now two main companies, the Joburg Ballet in Johannesburg, which they gave
Yeah,
recently a Cinderella, and
yes,
also in Cape Town with
right,
Mrs. Debbie Turner, who is the artistic director, and both of them,
yes.
Johannesburg and Cape Town, they are doing wonderful work, and there are a lot of talent, a
Well,
lot
you know
of
what?
talent. Excuse me?
Ironically, um, there's a lot of talent that comes out of there in medicine. Medicine, because my mother was a nurse, but also because I worked in Seattle,
Yes,
um, huge amount of m- doctors come out of Joburg and
yes,
Cape Town, and they are incredible surgeons. I
yes,
mean, how and what where I can't even pronounce the cities they're from, Wittenberg universities, and the talent that comes out, and
yes,
also in India. I've just come in contact with also very, very talented
yes,
in their craft. It's a little different in movement wise, but also the talent is there. It's
yes,
amazing.
yes, yes. In everything they do, there is a lot of talent. Before we end up this beautiful interview, Costanza, what is your main wish that you wish to present to the dancers who are listening to you, to the teachers, to the choreographers, and to the world of ballet who will watch you on YouTube? What is your wish to preserve the performing arts and the beauty of the performing art in the future?
I wish for everyone to have faith, hope, and love, and the respect of those that went before you, because without them, there would be no today or tomorrow. Please understand the lineage and please respect the lineage of those that sacrificed so much before you were even a twinkle in someone's eye, because they were the ones that built this world that we now live in. And I was fortunate enough to have that with my own family, but that was a very big rarity that I had both. But also the fact that they need to understand that please hold on, never give up that hope or love, grace, beauty, and love for the dance and for the music. And remember that no one dances without the music.
Very well said. Bravo, Costanza. It's a beautiful, beautiful quote that you said. And I hope that many people will listen to you. And what is your wish that you wish to present to the members of Ballet International Group on Facebook? You know, there are many artists, about 1,800, and there are many
Yes,
other people who are not in the world of ballet, but they are just friends of ballet. So what is your wish that you, or just an idea that you wish to give them to preserve art?
I wish that they would remember that just to breathe is art. Breathing, existing, there would be no existence, even if you go back to the beginning of the earth. There was always art on the walls of caves. No matter what, there's always been art in this world. It may not be spoken, but there's art everywhere you look. And to please pay attention, play close attention to what you see. Be an observer. Observe. You don't need to speak, but if you observe, you will learn a lot. Observing is probably your biggest talent, is observation, and no words necessary, but just your eyes. Keep your ears open and take it all in and think, my goodness, look at the beauty around me. Even in the sound of the leaves or the trees or just the natural world. It's God's beauty. It's there for us to take in every day of our lives. But so much of it is just forgotten because we're going too fast. Slow down, take it in, breathe.
Yes, I agree with you. Time is going too fast.
Much too fast.
Yes,
Yes, yes. As my family would say, es macht nicht, it matters not. As we would say auf Deutsch, um, let's see, what is the family saying? Uh, it escapes me at this moment, but we had S marks next, which means it matters not. Um, I don't know why my own family saying is gone, but it is gone. You have to delete this little section of my memory loss at 5:30 in the morning here. But it is the Scheurer family had a long, long lineage, and so they had their own sayings in many languages.
yes,
Um, and I would hear Norwegian and German
yes,
predominantly spoke,
yes,
uh, and very little English. There was there wasn't even an English paper in my town when my family immigrated. There was no English spoken
yes,
on the stage of the big opera houses.
yes,
It was a foreign language. I mean, English was not ever spoken, and
yes,
so I grew up that way with
yes.
the foreign languages.
I
Um,
agree with you because sometimes I remember when I was young also I was doing some ballet classes with different type of teachers, and they were coming from different countries, and sometimes they were also explaining things on their own way. They couldn't express themselves in English, so they would explain a little bit with the hands, like you said, explaining the
mhm,
enchaînement, and also
mhm,
they use their own language of the native language. I mean, some of them
yeah.
were Russian, some of them were French, some others were from other nationalities. And obviously, you could understand what they said because in ballet, even if you are in many nationalities, we understand each other. We are all make part of one family.
Yes, exactly. It was the same way in music.
Yeah,
Um, it was so unspoken, because in my grandfather's time and my father's time, you know that in my city, there's been not one American conductor on the podium in over 118 years.
Yes.
And our newest conductor, Maestro, coming in is from Denmark.
Yes.
And, speaks very little English, but the music does not need English. It is, it's on the pages. And then, everybody seems to understand each other. It
Yes.
doesn't need the language of English because it doesn't need to be spoken. I
No.
mean, when my father first started on the podium here, it was Metropolis going out, who was from Greece, Dorati coming in, who was Hungarian, and Metropolis was a great friend of my grandfather's, and my grandfather knew Oberhofer and Ormandy and all of them. They were friends of the family. These were people that
Yeah.
just would walk through our house and sit down at our dinner table. But they were the most, like Henry Mancini, that did all the scores for the Disney and things like that. They were guests at our dinner table, and I would say, "Well, Daddy, who's this?" And they'd say, "Oh, it's Daddy's friends. It's no problem." And then they would, and then I found out much later in life it was Peter Serkin, and I last saw Peter before he passed in Seattle. And of course, the Serkin and the Bush family were
Yeah.
friends of ours way back in my grandfather's time in Cologne. They come from Cologne.
Yeah.
And they started the Marlborough School of Music here in Philadelphia. And so, I mean, everything seems to be, it doesn't matter. I was
Yeah.
just, my family table, dinner table was a potpourri of many, many artists from
Yes.
many, many countries.
Yes.
And that to me was a gift.
Yes. So, Mrs. Costanza Scheurer, it was an honor to have you online today, and I was very pleased to listen to your precious interview and to your precious words. That I do hope that people on YouTube and the Ballet International members will appreciate all you have said about a part of history of ballet. So I wish to thank you. I really wish to thank you with all my heart for participating. And also, I consider that where do you live now? In which place do you live in the United States?
Minnesota.
Minnesota is nearly 5 o'clock,
Eight
5:30, 5:30
in the morning, yes.
in the
It's very
morning.
early.
Yes,
Yeah.
because I saw you online and I asked you, would you be interested to make an interview? And without any hesitation, you said yes. So I captured that moment. And so now you are going to sleep for sure. And here in Italy, in Rome, it's 20 past 2 p.m. So thank
Yeah.
you very much for participating. A lot of love from me. And whenever you wish to make another interview, you are always welcome.
Well, I want to thank you for the kindness and generosity of your spirit, and also the long, long friendship and what you did for my family when I was very sick with COVID. I will never forget how kind you were in re-imaging my family, my grandfather, my father, my aunts, my uncles, all those photographs you did. They live with me still, and I share them with my family members. And they said, "Where did you get this of Grandpa?" And I said, "Well, my friend Jean-Pierre, JPP, did them for me, And they
Yes,
said,
I remember that
"Wow,
all
that
the photographs that you have sent me were scratched and they were very old. and I had
Yes.
to remake slowly, you know, with several process on the computer to bring alive many beautiful pictures that you have sent me. There were about 60, 65 pictures, but
Yes.
many of them were very old, but beautiful.
Well, that's because they are very old. You know, they were from the 1800s. You know, that's how old the family
So
history.
keep them preciously, all those pictures.
I will, darling. Thank you for your help.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot, and we stay in touch.
We
And
stay in touch.
as soon as I will upload the video on YouTube, I will let you know.
Thank you, darling. Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye bye.
Auf,
Many
auf
kisses from me.
Wiedersehen.
Bye
Auf
bye.
Wiedersehen. Bis später.
Auf Wiedersehen.